Hello everyone, this is your very real Soviet Bear aka Mio. I'm here with Devs Play Assault Android Cactus, and I'm here with the designer of the game. Hello.
Hi, how's it going, everyone?
Can you introduce yourselves to the audience?
Sure. I'm Sanatana Mishra, or better known as Nart to everyone who knows me. I was a designer on this game as part of a 3-person team called Witchbeam, and I'm probably going to make a bunch of crazy comments over the next hour, so
Okay, I will hopefully not sound too crazy when I play this. I think I need to actually go back and press start on my... There we go.
Yeah, I think you're logged in with the keyboard, so
yeah, now it's fine. Okay, so I played the tutorial only of this, so I'm going into this mostly blind. So this, like from the start, just like reminds me of the Turtles games, Turtles in Time, with the way it's colored and kind of like laid out. I'm guessing the other players are to the side.
Yeah, if you introduce new characters, then your portrait like shifts to the left, and then they drop in, and it can kind of fill up to 4 players in local co-op. And the idea was we wanted to give every character 3 vectors to their identity. So we have like the visual identity, the style that they have, which is color coded for each character throughout the game: Holly in red, Lemon in yellow, Coral in blue, and Cactus in green. And then as you play through the game, you'll notice that they have like a gameplay identity that comes through in the weapon set down the bottom with the primary and the secondary, and then also a kind of like style personality that comes through in the dialogue, where they each have unique ways of talking with all the bosses, and you can get a different angle on the game's overall feel.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, so I'll go with Holly since we like the color red in this channel.
Sounds good.
Okay, so this is the tutorial.
If you start the tutorial, it'll show the intro, but then you can skip the tutorial itself if you wanted people to see that. But otherwise, you can jump into whatever.
Yeah, we can do that.
So the first time you play it, automatically puts you through this, which you would have seen when you first booted it up, just to kind of frame what's actually happening in the game.
Sent a garbled message 3 days ago before going silent. We need you in close to scan for anomalies.
Weapons lock detected. Preparing for evasive maneuvers.
Weapons lock? That's a civilian freighter.
There's a lot of lasers pointed at me. I think it used to be their asteroid defense system.
This is beyond the scope of the operation. I'm advising you to abort the mission and retreat immediately.
And submit a mission failed report? I hate those forms.
I'll take my chances with the lasers.
Listen to me, Cactus. The hangar is sealed. There's no way on board.
I think I see an opening.
Nice.
It's okay, folks. I'm the police.
She's a good driver.
Being calm. That was amazing. I thought we were done.
A pilot in this case.
I can't believe you hit those robots with your ship.
Oh, no problem. I do that kind of thing all the time.
Save people or crash into things?
Both?
Okay, down to tutorial. Oh yeah, I did like this, that when you show the control, you're actually asking the player to do the control before they continue.
Yeah, it's surprising how many people aren't experienced with twin stick controls and things like that, so asking them to actually do the inputs in some cases, and the fact that we wanted to use a button for firing was fairly important to us, because even if you are familiar with twin sticks, you might just assume you point to shoot at things.
So one immediate question, speaking of controls, when I'm playing on keyboard, does the mouse require readjustment like the stick, or is it like focused on the one point you put it on?
So with the mouse, you actually get a reticle on the screen that you can move around in any position to pinpoint, accurately shoot where you want to shoot. So it's not the same setup as with the analog stick, where you're kind of just like rolling around the outside. So if you're using the extents of the screen, it might be a little bit slower to shoot, but as you get used to reticle aiming, or like people are very used to positioning the mouse exactly where they want, even for just using the operating system. So they should be pretty fast at that.
Yeah. Oh, she gets her
It does
wings.
split up.
You want?
Yeah. Yeah, when you grab the accelerate power up, you get the wings coming and add on, so you get a nice visual flair explaining things.
So the battery expires as you play, regardless whether you take damage or not.
Yeah, it's essentially your win condition for the game is staying in positive battery state. So being knocked down is a nuisance that'll slow you down, but it won't actually end the game in any way. The only way you can get game overed is if you run out of battery, which is purely time-based, and the only way to get new battery is to defeat the enemies. So a lot of the game's systems and design is focused around ensuring that all your decision making is about the most efficient way to push through the level.
Not part of their little uprising because androids have independent cores, but that just means we're targeted along with the humans.
Section Lords can't take over ships. Your Nexus core is in charge. Why is she letting this happen?
The core stopped responding 3 days ago. We were still investigating when the Section Lords made their move.
Then our priority is getting your core back online. She's the one who can regain control. Someone, lead the way.
Hold on there, space cop. There's 100,000 homicidal robots and 3 kilometers of ship between us and the core.
Yeah?
Who in their right mind would expect total strangers to follow them into certain death?
Oh, right. I didn't introduce myself. My name's Cactus.
I like that logic.
Cactus has her own internal logic that she goes with, and she just rolls with that.
Yeah, I just wanted to set this as well. Just when we're talking over cutscenes so people can check that out. So yeah, let's go with Holly.
Sure. So part of the reason for the battery change is trying to deal with the way, logistically, if you think of shoot 'em ups and the traditional scrolling type from Japan in the arcades, or twin sticks as kind of defined by Eugene Jarvis, you had this separation between the way that you interact with the levels. Like in a scrolling shoot 'em up or a traditional action shoot 'em up, you don't have an option but to interact with the things that are coming at you. But in a twin stick, you can position yourself, you can avoid fights, you can use various angles and objects to your advantage. And a lot of the time, what I found is that as players are doing worse in twin stick games, they actually play more conservatively and will push themselves to corners of the map or angles and play in ways that are not very interesting to them or to viewers or to anyone. They're kind of boring ways to play, but they're also very dominant. So the battery is an attempt to solve this and create a system where your best chance at winning is always to kill things efficiently, to go out and engage in the level, to collect power-ups, to run around. You don't have the option to passively avoid interaction.
Yeah, so this is far more enemies than expected in a level 1.
Yeah, there's quite a few.
I also like the decision to make dodge the same as this weapon special is also like quite interesting. I didn't expect that one. What's the reasoning behind that?
There's a couple of reasons behind it. The first one is that you have limited buttons on the control pad, so trying to make every action you can perform meaningful, or even on a keyboard and mouse, you're kind of dealing with limited inputs. You don't want people using a bunch of different inputs in a game that's primarily about instantaneous decision making. And the other one is that when you layer it like that on top of the weapon swap, you make it more of a strategic decision and less of a necessity, an action that you need to perform all the time. So you kind of multi-layer it and you end up with this addition of strategic thinking. And that's a lot of the design of the game is built around that idea that anybody can kind of move backwards and aim at enemies. It's fairly trivial and easy. That's something that we've done a lot of as players and in this style of game. So trying to come up with a lot of things for you to think about and have to make decisions about is a core part of the design.
Yeah, I could get behind that. It does make sense because I now thinking about it, if there was a dodge button, people would just be dodge rolling like in Dark Souls all the time.
Yeah, it's not really a choice to dodge when dodge is something that you do constantly and has no other elements tied to it, right? But in this case, you have to deal with not using your secondary all the time, choosing when to dodge, timing it so that you dodge when you need to use your secondary, but also making use of it. Kind of, there's a nuance there that it adds. I like to think anyway.
No, I think that completely makes sense. It kind of works here because it's basically like, do you get a defensive action or an offensive action, but both share the same cooldown? Because like right now, this cannonball, has one very good use, which is clearing up a lot of enemies at once. Oh, yeah, untouchable.
Nice.
But also dodging
Played
is kind
shoot
of
'em
like...
ups before.
Yeah, I've played quite a few. I don't play twin sticks that much. I play a lot of Nuclear Throne and Monolith, but I mostly play horizontal scrolling ones.
I think that's one of the things that we tried to do with this game, and I'm fairly proud of as well, is introduce some of the emotional connection you get from the side-scrolling games into the way that twin stick works. So you're rewarded for being aggressive, for shooting things, for collecting power-ups. You're pushed to do those things instead of that kind of defensive nature that twin sticks often fall into.
Yeah, no, I can completely get behind that. It seems like in the past few years, just like twin stick shooters have gotten quite a nice resurgence. I mean, they never really got away. It's just like there's really high quality ones that got released in a short amount of time, and also a lot of twin stick shooters that have like twin stick shooter elements, like the new Nier game or Fury, stuff like that.
Yeah, Fury and Nier are very interesting elements where they use that, and then you've got the pseudo twin sticks that are hybrid genres like Nuclear Throne and Enter the Gungeon and all those kind of games as well. It's been fun. I still think the best pure arcade stuff these days is probably made by House Marquee, which
Yes.
I don't know if I pronounced that right, but those guys, those people are just incredible with their understanding of arcade gameplay.
Yeah, Next Machina is like on a whole new level. Like, it's pretty crazy.
And it's tricky to make something that has pure arcade gameplay in the current landscape as well. Like all those other games we just mentioned are not pure arcade style shooters. They're hybrids in some way, or they're introducing roguelite elements or something like that. And Cactus is blending a few different genres, but we also tried very hard to be true to the arcade style. I think the word is kind of pure, because you have a game that it doesn't have RNG, it doesn't have any random elements. It's purely down to your own skill and understanding of the game from moment to moment.
Yeah, I do. Like, I honestly do appreciate that kind of stuff, but I also know that a lot of people just kind of want to like beat a game and be done with it. So like replaying the same game over and over for a better score, better performance requires like really good like base game feel and having that particular audience as well. So like for Next Machina, like you can kind of like beat Next Machina in like an afternoon, no problem. It's pretty good at harder difficulties with finding all the secrets and the scores and stuff that's difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. They do a wonderful job of layering that. I've always loved their boss design, the way that it changes so drastically as you up the difficulty in everything from Super Stardust through to Next Machina.
Yeah. Also, I really like how the stages play with basically pathing, because like this kind of like I've already been in a situation where okay, I'm locked down, I have to take damage because I didn't plan ahead.
We tried to use a lot of dynamic elements in the stage design as well. It's fairly trivial to do, but it makes a large impact on the way that you interact with things. So you see in this stage, it's gradually opening up as you play through. It started with pillars in the center around the edges. Now that those are holes and enemies can climb up through them, the previous stage had the lights turning off. And it's kind of introduced gradually as you play, because we don't want to overload people with just the huge amount of enemy types and encounters you were talking about earlier. There's a lot of enemies just in level 1. But as the game goes on, that becomes a bigger and bigger focus, because when you're dealing with this top-down kind of style of play, positioning is a huge part of the gameplay system, right? Like it's almost the only thing you think about in a lot of situations.
Yeah, I also like how it kind of just like turns into this big satisfying finale where like now the entire stage is available and you can just go wild.
And that's kind of important as well to the... We designed a mini emotional arc for every level, or a series of kind of peaks and then canyons that you go through with the encounters you play through. So it tries to build up, peak a little bit, drop down, give you a moment's respite, and then build to bigger peaks as the level goes on. And part of that is in the encounter design, and then the level design sits on top of that with the way that it changes and transforms, and it hopefully leads to that moment where the end of a level, even though it's only 3 minutes deep, is much more intense and kind of can be overwhelming compared to the first minute of the level.
Oh, man,
Despite being in a fixed arena. Oh, a nice cannonball shot.
Thank you. I seem to play a lot of games with cannonballs that work like this, so I kind of learned to intercept boss movements or enemy movements. It's a weird niche of a power-up to know to play.
It could be a tricky thing for people to play this character into this boss too, because she's one of the more beginner-friendly characters with the homing primary weapon. But then you fight a boss like this who moves quite quickly, and her secondary, despite doing huge damage, is slow moving, so it kind of pushes you to learn a lot more and play the game better, I guess.
Yeah, it has this little delay before it actually shoots as well.
Yeah, well, you can swap over and wait if you wanted to, and certain weapons do favor that as well. So there's like a mine layer you'll get later that you might not always want to shoot instantaneously or all of its ammo through. So the shot only comes out after you finish weapon swapping, and then you weapon swap back. And you can use that to jump through the bullet waves as well. So if there's like a ring of bullets coming towards you, you can swap in, fire your cannonball, then swap back.
I also like that he moves away so I can pick up the power-up.
He always tries to reorient himself at a good angle away from you.
Ah, shit, he changed movement. There we go.
Point blank. So you could see earlier when you got downed, you lose your weapon energy, but you don't actually get game overage at all. And based on how you're playing so far, I think it's pretty unlikely we'll see a game over throughout most of this game, just given how much experience you seem to have with this type of game. But it's part of the way that we feel this game plays differently to the existing games and shoot 'em ups and twin sticks alike, is that you're not so much worrying about your life stock as much as you're worrying about your efficiency, your destructive capabilities. Yeah. And if you were to be on the edge of failure, it's always better to try and push yourself and get in the action rather than pulling back and trying to just survive, because survival is inherently linked to destruction.
So I'm gonna switch it up. We're gonna try the default character, because I'm guessing like her being, you know, your first choice, she is probably meant to be more beginner friendly.
She's a mix, yeah. She has a very simple set of weapons that's easy to understand. So while she might, Holly is extremely beginner friendly with the secret weapon, but she has that slightly tricky to use secondary. Cactus is that extremely easy to understand weapon set. So it fires in a straight line, it does damage, and then her secondary fires in a straight line as well and does a lot of damage. But in both cases, you can use them in interesting ways as you become more advanced. But yeah, they're designed so that your understanding of how to be good with them is kind of easy, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, but it's like she's pretty much where you point is where you shoot.
Yeah.
And Holly is just kind of like you can focus on dodging more than actual aiming.
So when we move into World 2, because we're still trying to introduce a lot of new enemy types across the game, this is another level that's fairly static, like we saw in some of the early World 1 levels. But we try to make every level have its own identity that you'll remember it by, and I think you're not quite up to it yet, but there's a bit in a wave or two where this level kind of comes alive and you see its gimmick in action. And that's something I tried to do with a lot of the level design, is make sure that they all have very memorable moments like this, swarm coming at you. And then that'll kind of peak and crescendo again and again.
Do the characters have like different default speeds, or do they all like have the same locomotion, essentially?
They have the same locomotion because they all have to engage in the level geometry the same way, and some of the designs of the levels is predicated on how you have to move through them. So,
yep, I didn't
go for it.
I didn't notice in time. Let's try this again.
Go for it. So you can fail out even if you're playing really well, if you're not grabbing the batteries and recharging. Purely staying alive and dodging is only part of how you succeed. But yeah, all the characters have the same base stats in terms of number of hit points and locomotion settings. The only difference between how they play is down to their weapon sets, and then those weapons and how they interact. It allowed us to do things like keeping boss designs very consistent and fair across different character types, so the amount of damage that different bosses do from different attacks is always going to be balanced against every character type. There won't be something that one-shots one character but doesn't another character, and also allows us to control enemy bullet patterns to give you nicer sort of bullet hell boss encounters and general encounters that you can always be guaranteed to either be able to dodge or not be able to dodge, regardless of which character you're playing.
Yeah, I had a problem with I think like the Souls games, because your locomotion depends on your equipment or just your build. So sometimes you end up with bosses that just don't seem to be made for the way you can move. So I can definitely understand that being a concern.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword as well, though, because the more variants you can get out of the different characters, the more value there is in even having multiple characters. But we felt like this was a compromise that was worth having, where the weapons are drastically different, but your locomotion and other stats are the same.
Yeah, because like essentially like on a systemic level, you're just changing two weapons they have, but resource-wise, you have to like do visual design modeling, voice acting, and just like all sorts of other things per character.
Yeah, the cost is very high, so you do want to get as much as you can out of it. Can be a slightly difficult game to play and talk about simultaneously, so you're doing pretty well at that.
Yeah, this seems to be a trend. The last Let's Play was also a really crazy platformer, so talking and playing seems to be pretty hard. Okay, it's fine. People are here to listen to you mostly anyway.
I'll just keep prattling on about everything.
Ooh, I like the blocky design of this.
Yeah, this was probably the first level that I actually worked on specifically in terms of its interaction. pseudo learning how to program in Unity to make it all work. It's one of the first really dynamic levels in the game that showcases how surprise is a big part of the design. Like
Yeah.
you don't expect what happens.
Yeah, no, I really like this because as soon as I saw this, I was like, oh, okay, this level is gonna change super drastically because everything looks the same, so you can justify any platforms moving or coming back.
And I think it's important to beat people's expectations, especially when you're working within a genre or style of game that has a lot of competition or a lot of experience behind it. You know, people probably played a lot of shoot 'em ups or twin stick shooters, so when you can beat their expectations and do something that's outside of anything they've experienced before, that's going to be a huge win for just setting their mindset for the rest of the game. That's something I like to think about a lot anyway, is how people are going to approach bits of your game. Not just how the game actually works, but how people are going to be thinking about it going into it.
I think like with shmups, it's very easy to get into a trap of like looking like everything else. I know when I used to play just random Mega Drive games, there were a lot of shmups there, and most of them you couldn't even tell apart because they were just, you know, moving, shooting, and the same stock weapons. So you kind of have to basically sell the player early on what is the thing your game does better than other shmups.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to explain why this game is interesting compared to any other game they could be choosing to play right now.
Yeah.
And even once they've committed to playing the game, it's really fun to exceed people's expectations or kind of surprise them like this, because it creates a scenario where you can do something later on that's really, really surprising, and they'll kind of be expecting something, but they won't know exactly what to expect. And that's when a lot of the most positive moments of the game come out, when I watch people play it, when they go, oh my god, I can't believe that just happened. That being some cool thing, right?
Yeah.
So you need to set up the possibility of that early on.
Let's see. Let's go try another character. So, Android select. Let's try Lemon.
Yes.
I'm surprised you didn't jump into Starch. A lot of people, once they unlock their first character after beating the boss, they're all about trying that new, unavailable secret source.
Yeah, well, I want to go through everyone first, so I have a... how I'm approaching this is how I approach fighting games. I want to play everyone a bit and then see who I'll stick with. So
you actually skipped ahead a level there as well to process, which is fine. We actually set it up so that all the levels within a zone are available to you once you reach that zone, and you can choose and pick which ones you want to play. The only one you have to beat is the boss in order to get through the next gate. The bosses act as kind of difficulty gatekeepers like that.
Oh, I had no idea it works like that. Well, we'll go back to Oxygen after this.
It's not a feature we make a big point of explaining to people. It's more like it's there if you needed it or wanted to skip a level, you can go and do that. And we figure most people don't want to skip levels, they don't want to skip through the game, so just making the natural flow level to level is fine. But if somebody's really angry at a level, let them go out and move on.
Yeah, it seems like a good compromise. I know I wish, like, in some games I played, I could have skipped certain levels. Like, in Fury, I pretty much just don't play the final boss anymore because I just hate playing it. So I appreciate the feature. That's a weird
one of the levels where there's a lot of bullets on screen.
Yeah, and a lot of conveyor belts changing where I am.
Yeah, I was kind of inspired by Bomberman with this level, actually.
Ah, okay.
I always love the conveyor belt levels in Bomberman, so I thought, what could I do to make that interesting in the context of kind of bullet dodging?
Okay, so I overly underestimated these two big dudes.
They're pretty strong. The bombs have a decent AoE on them when they do explode, but if you can kind of keep out of the bomb distance, they're not too hard to deal with.
I'm just getting started.
One of the fun things about the conveyor belt, and you do it too, from what I can see here, is everyone naturally wants to fight against the conveyor belt. Because you want to be walking backwards, and mentally you kind of end up on them in situations where you want to be moving against them. But actually, the method to get the most out of them is almost always just to move with them, because you're moving so fast that nothing can really touch you.
Yeah.
I always enjoyed that.
It's like processing a lot of directions at the same time. Like, you associate backpedaling with avoiding stuff, but then also this is pushing you in a direction that might not be where you want to backpedal.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's next?
I always enjoy watching how that plays out with people.
Let's go back to the previous level then. Oxygen was the one. So what would be one of your favorite shmups? Unless this is your favorite shmup, then it's a very short question.
I do love this game. It's probably it's definitely the only game I've ever worked on that I genuinely love and can play myself and enjoy. But it's not my favorite shmup ever, because I think that Ikaruga is probably the best shmup that's ever been made, and I don't think it'll ever be topped because it was a combination of how good it was and also how fresh it was, and it's hard to be that fresh ever again, so it's tricky.
Yeah, that is a shmup people go to fairly often. I've actually like not played Ikaruga, which is something I keep wanting to fix, but never get around to it.
I'm actually terrible at Ikaruga. The one that I'm best at, I'm probably best at Super Stardust HD on the PS3. That was the shmup where I got, I was able to get into the top 100 on global rankings in the arcade mode, where you need to play for like 6 hours or something and clock the game through multiple times.
Nice.
And I love that game, and that was the only shmup I've ever been truly good at, but there's something about Ikaruga where I play it where even though I suck and I struggle and I die on level 3, it's so interesting and so kind of awesome that I just love it.
Yeah, I think the one I played the most was Musha Alest for the Mega Drive. But it's again, I'm not fairly good at it, it's just I enjoy playing it. I don't really know which one I'm like good at. I can probably consider myself decent at most of them.
It's weird how that works. It's not always the game that you connect with that you find kind of works for the way that you play games. That's not always the one that interests you the most, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like especially like I play a lot of fighting games as well, and the fighting games I'm better at aren't necessarily the fighting games I like more. Which is weird because usually people end up playing the one they like the most and ending up being the best with that one.
Yeah, if you play it a lot, then you should become the best at it, right? But
Yeah.
that's not how it works for me with Ikaruga. I have mental blocks with the way that game plays, even though I love it. Oh, you need to grab the battery.
Oh shit, where is it?
There you go.
Alright, who's next?
Someone in chat mentioning a lot of hardcore shmup players hate Ikaruga. Yeah, it's true, actually. Probably not the best pure shmup. Definitely not the best pure shmup, actually. A lot of those cave shmups and things, I think, have better overall kind of hardcore design to them, but Ikaruga is the one that I find the freshest, the most interesting. The whole switching polarities mechanic and system is really, really fun, so that's why I pick it despite being bad at it.
Yeah, a friend of mine is doing a feature called Ranking of Shmups, where he just plays through any shmup he can find and tries to rank them on a universal list. And I've seen a lot of weird stuff I never knew existed. It's amazing how much like the genre is actually developed in Japanese arcades.
It's huge. The sheer variety of them is overwhelming, and most of them don't really make it outside of Japan, and if they do, it's as part of big collections or not all the versions, because they get so many versions at the arcade, you know, that so many revisions.
Yeah. What happened? Oh, I think I double tapped the weapon. Like when I visited Japan last year, I went to a few arcades, and one thing I realized is, I mean, obviously their arcade games cater to, you know, their players. So my quarter on a shmup lasted 2 minutes before I gamed over because they're so difficult. But then I tried playing in FPS, and I played for 40 minutes on one quarter and basically had to quit the game because I realized I would be there forever.
But you know, that's something that isn't super common in arcade game design these days, and I think it's interesting. I went to a talk at GDC a couple years ago with Eugene Jarvis, the creator of Robotron and Smash TV, and it's kind of the godfather of twin-stick shooters, right, in the West.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the design of Robotron being not a quarter muncher. It wasn't designed to take your money eternally. It was actually designed to create hero players who would then encourage other players to play and spend their money. So when you're kind of an amateur, you're kind of new at the game, you would lose the game fairly quickly and die out. But then, because of its design being pure and fair and nothing in it inherently being unbeatable or kind of random, you could get better and better and better, and then you could play for that hour, and you would convince other people who are watching to pick up the game and play it, and then they would spend their money on it and die in 2 minutes, right? So you get this follow-on effect. And I really liked the way he was explaining that, the difference between Smash TV, which did munch your quarters and expect you to die, and Robotron, where it was much fairer and more pure. And in Cactus's case, it is actually a very pure, fair game. There's no RNG. All the enemy spawns and all the weapon power-up spawns are completely controlled by time that you kill them, and also position of your character within the level. So theoretically, you can game the spawn systems and the power-up systems as you get better. And we see that a lot in the speedrunning community and in the kind of like advanced players, where they're not just dealing with chaotic situations, they're engineering their own preferences. So yeah, I like the difference in the way that works. Like you're saying, that you get 2 minutes out of it, but then someone who's really good at those games gets an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like, considering that, I mean, you can't really separate a game from the way you, like, buy it, I'd say. Like, arcade games are always gonna have their interest of, like, having you spend more quarters, but I like that idea of, okay, the better you are, the more you get out of your quarter. Ooh, damn. One friend of mine who lives in Japan who goes a lot to arcades explained to me as, you know, like why regular people there get really good at, you know, games that are considered hardcore. Like, you know, someone who works as a waitress at a bar will get really good at Tekken because she has like a half an hour to hour break, and then basically a game is 100 yen, so she goes there every day. At the start, like, that 1 yen is gonna last her 10 minutes, but the better she gets, the longer it lasts for her, essentially. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure.
This boss can get pretty chaotic as things go on. You gotta be using your secondary a lot.
Yeah.
You're burning it down though. Someone in chat asked what my thoughts on Nex Machina are. I really like Nex Machina. I think that it's cool. I actually haven't played it that much though. I need to go in and do some deep dives on it. It's fun that they keep coming back and kind of beating my expectations of what they can do that's interesting with these pure arcade games. I think House Marquee, better than almost anyone, understand why these games feel good for players, and that's a key for me. Like a lot of these shmups and things, people make a lot of them, especially in the West. I find that a lot of them are just not that enjoyable to sit down and play in your hand. The controls, the response, the graphical design, and Housemarque just like nail it every time. So yeah, I dig what they do, and I think it's cool that they worked with Eugene Jarvis to kind of come back to the person who invented the genre and do something new and fresh.
Yeah, Lex Machina is like, it's really pretty. Like, and it's one of those games where my only complaints are so minimal. Like, it's literally just like, oh, this one small detail is an issue, but just like the entire package is so impressive that that's really the only thing you can mind in such a game.
So this one was a fun level checkpoint that you're working on now, because again, it was one of those opportunities for us to beat expectations and do something that you might not be prepared for. And as you can see, this level, it's not a fixed arena, which is the first level in the game that isn't. It actually has you traveling down a path, dealing with enemies and trying to push forward to some kind of goal.
Keep forgetting that the plasma rifle says that the plasma field is at my position in front of me. Ow.
It's generally a good idea to run in and drop the plasma field and then kind of use it as a
out.
defensive posture.
Yeah.
Because it will push enemies away, damage them, reflect bullets.
Especially for this level, because it seems to be exactly the perfect width for this hallway.
Yeah, it covers almost the entire thing. It's very, very good for that.
So how did you pair up weapons with specials? Like, you know, like, okay, you have the main character who has a flamethrower with an assault rifle, and this character who has a plasma field with a shotgun. Like, was there any particular reason you went with those?
You know, someone mentioning this level builds itself as you go along. Yes, if you look ahead and see some secret things, that is actually totally how it works. It's completely dynamic, the length based on how you play it. But to answer your question about the weapons, it originally started out with you being able to mix and match them in the earliest designs, you know, before anything was locked in place. But the way that worked didn't really allow for weapons to shine, I suppose. You end up with a lot of dominant combinations, dominant strategies, best case scenarios, and that kind of thing. And by manually pairing them the way that we have, we were able to really balance the characters out and create flaws in one weapon that we solved with another weapon. So that's why you see things like the Seeker, for example, that can destroy enemies slowly but very efficiently because it almost never misses, and then the Cannonball that can destroy enemies extremely quickly but not very easily because you have to actually line them up and land these perfect shots. So that was the main way of thinking about it behind them, was to balance out the damage potential of the character and also make sure that there were no holes in the way they have to play the game. So Coral has to get up close and personal with her shotgun, but it does huge damage, but she has to put herself in harm's way, right? So you have this problem with the shotgun where you're going to die a lot if you go up and use it. But her secondary reflects bullets and pushes enemies away, so if you drop the secondary, then you're kind of safe even if you're super close. So it's this really nice balancing act between the character's strengths and weaknesses, and if you're utilizing both weapons well, you can eliminate those weaknesses.
Yeah, definitely it seems like a better idea than just mix and matching any weapons, because as you say, then just people get the optimal combos down and that's it.
Yeah, and that's something we didn't really want people to do. We wanted them to play around and experiment with the different characters and the different weapons and find one that suits their playstyle as opposed to the one that's just always going to be the strongest for every situation. So it works out reasonably well. And in terms of damage potential, like, I'm very proud of how we were able to then balance it because we're controlling the weapon sets each character has. It's not quite perfect. You see some characters end up with more rank 1 scores than others across the leaderboard, but in general they're all within kind of 5% of each other, despite the massive variance in weapons.
I also really like how the weapon angle, camera angle changes in the stage.
Yeah, this is on a train, so it's scrolling around and you're having to deal with the train turning, and you'll see in a little bit it'll actually go fast and kind of push you off the edge. And the laser comes around, and you probably want to weapon swap through that laser, which is quite a handy thing to be able to do, as you just did.
Yeah, but then the second time I missed.
It happens.
Yeah, it's fine. Thankfully this is not an instant kill game, so we're good.
Yeah, most weapons don't instant kill you here, which is a very conscious decision in the design. It wasn't always necessarily going to be like that, but we looked at the way 3D perspective works, essentially. So you'll notice the camera in this game is at an angle, the characters and the objects in the game are all fully 3D, so even though it's played on a sort of semi-two-dimensional plane, there's a lot of 3D perspective you have to deal with. So in order to minimize the effects of that, there's a lot that goes into both visual and gameplay design. The way that the characters have huge heads, for example, is not just an aesthetic choice outside of the game's design. It's actually there because it allows you to see the character at any given time. They got this big singular colored hair on each character, right? And so you can see the big huge blob of hair and you know exactly where you are. And it's the same for the other design as well. The fact that it's not one hit and that we have this energy system is because with the imprecision of 3D perspective, it's unreasonable to expect people never to be hit by anything. So we accept that you're going to take some damage and balance the game around that.
So how much iteration did the projectile and enemy coloring go through?
There's a fair bit that it goes through. You'll notice all the damage dealing attacks that you perform are actually in yellow, which means that those attacks will only hurt enemies. All the enemy attacks are in blue, which means they'll only hurt the players, and then very certain specific attacks like lasers and bombs are in red, which hurt anything. So there's color coding there on that aspect. The character color coding is just to give them a nice visual differentiation between each other, as we were kind of talking about earlier. But the overall color coordination is mostly just to provide subliminal information while you play that you will gradually soak up even if you don't need to pay attention to it.
Did you have a lot of like basically art guidelines for actual colors levels we're allowed to use? Because I'm guessing you don't want projectiles to merge into the background, or was that never an issue?
Well, pretty much all the art was actually just done by one person, all the characters and the weapon graphics and the environments, so there wasn't a need necessarily for a big set of guidelines that, usually that's used for multiple people having to deal with. So when one person understands the visual definition of the weapons and then the levels themselves, you just kind of work within the spec that you've already created. But it was obviously a conscious decision. It's just not something that logistically wasn't a big deal to deal with. It did impact us a few times though, where certain color combinations didn't make sense, where we really wanted to use them. You'll notice that all the floors are kind of darker colors so that you can read bright projectiles against them, and the projectiles themselves have that bright core dark edging around them so that they read against various colored floors as well. Which is a bit of a shame because we're on a spaceship, so you can't have that really, really bright white aesthetic that sci-fi loves to have. Everything needs to have kind of a grayer tone to it. But it works well enough, and we found ways around that with the nice blues and greens, and tried to create variance without breaking the ability to see things.
Yeah. So I'd say that this character's special weapon is the easiest to process, because I'm using it fairly like defensively, but like mostly defensively, so I can time it with dodges as well. It's kind of like, okay, it's a double defense. I have the bubble that will block enemies and projectiles, and also a dodge that will just avoid it. Whereas with other characters, it's an attack versus a dodge, so it's kind of harder for me to process in terms of, do I want to like dodge or attack?
Yeah, Carl's is a two-factor secondary like that. The fact that you get pushing away, damaging, and reflecting simultaneously is really, really nice for you having to not think about that aspect. But
Yeah.
conversely, you have to think a lot more about your positioning because all your weapons have a fixed range of about 30% of the screen size, right?
Yeah, so you have to kind of get knee deep into things.
Yeah, and you don't want to give yourself no options to get out, even if you're dropping the bubble in a really nice place.
I really like this stage, by the way. I like the way this you kind of like choose which side you're on and how the flamethrower works.
Yeah, we do some nice things with the flamethrower here too. It starts out with one side is flaming and it's rotating and rotating back. Then it's kind of the other side is flaming, then it's swapping back and forward, then they're both off and then they're both on, and we can really screw with you and your ability to position yourself accurately. And I think that's a hallmark of the level design, is that they're designed to surprise you.
Let's try the hidden secret character, which I'm guessing is this one of the fan favorite characters, but it looks like a fan favorite.
Starch?
Yeah.
She's definitely a fan favorite character. She's also a really fun character, I think, in terms of her weapon set and her personality. So why she's one of the first ones you unlock is we wanted you to feel good about trying new characters. So some of the other characters are a little bit more complicated than Starch, and you might, like when you play Aubergine, you might not like Aubergine. Some people who play her will love her, and this is part of the design of the characters, is I'm okay with the love-hate relationship since there are so many of them, as long as some people really do love them. But for the first unlock, we wanted it to be almost a universally kind of approachable character, so that you'd feel better about trying new characters every time you see them.
I mean, to be fair, like lasers are one of my favorite shmup power-ups, because when you upgrade them, they usually just fill up the entire screen.
And then the micro missiles are that huge kind of cool anime thing that I think suits the style of the game well, right?
Yeah. Okay, let's try
Oh
this
no,
again.
the battery!
Yeah, I was going for a battery and then I got knocked down. I think I got too used to the benefits of having the plasma field.
Yeah, there's different ways you have to use the weapons as well. So the micro missiles do a huge amount of damage and can cover a lot of space, but you have to think about them very differently to the plasma field.
Yeah.
You still probably want to use them very often, though. I think that's one thing that can be hard to convey, is the benefit of using your secondary very often is quite large in the game. The cooldown is only several seconds, so you can really swap back and forward and just use them all the time. But a lot of people feel concerned about using something labeled as a limited use weapon.
I think it's also like in part because it's a dodge. Like there's probably also the reasoning, okay, what if I don't have dodge when I need it?
Yeah, absolutely. The duality of having to make that decision is important, and that's why we don't want you to use it constantly, and that's why there even is a limit, because we wanted you to have to think about these things. But it's also a tricky thing with the way people are used to thinking about limited use weapons is so built around decades of playing games where you don't use them unless you have to, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And here we want you to use it as much as you kind of can.
I mean, FPS games have had that problem for decades. Like, oh, what if after this big boss enemy, there's another big boss enemy? I need to save my rockets.
Exactly, and it's not a. It's a difficult problem to solve because it comes with so much baggage, and it's not just how you think about this game, but it's how you played a lot of other games. But the most fun way to play those games is to use those weapons regularly. So it's a tricky thing. I'd love to try and solve it in an FPS one day. I don't know how you'd go about it, but you'd have to have a lot of bonuses associated with using those limited weapons, and a lot of kind of new ones that you get all the time.
Yeah, it's a tricky design decision, especially now that the FPS come in so many flavors. Like you have so many FPS with like persistence, like RPG style persistence between levels, or meta progression, or like I think like Doom is the newest Doom is like kind of the first one in a while that felt like old school in the terms of like you never change your weapons or anything. Oh man, like you always have the same weapons throughout all levels, so there's no reason not to use them. This is not working out for me. Let's try her one more time and see if I need to change characters.
Can be the way. Yeah, the new Doom was quite interesting how it managed to do that feel similar to the old Doom while actually being very new in its approach to things. I think they did a great job. They surprised a lot of people. I certainly wasn't expecting it based on the trailers and kind of when they revealed it at, was it E3 or something?
It was something like that, yeah.
You know, it focused very heavily on the pre-authored melee kill animations, and you're thinking, I don't know if this is gonna feel anything like Doom, and then you play it and you're like, holy crap, this is Doom.
Yeah, I actually I got it mostly because of Snap Map, because I wanted the easy to use level editor just to mess around in my spare time. I was like, oh, the game can be whatever, I'm just gonna buy this for the map editor, and then the game actually turned out to be good.
Was the map editor good?
I mean, for what I wanted, was pretty nice. Because I kind of miss those old school easy to use editors, a la Heroes of Might and Magic map editors, or just StarCraft.
Battery?
Just StarCraft soul editor things. So yeah, it was
think
nice. A lot of people didn't like it.
People started out on that StarCraft map editor. I love
Yeah.
that thing.
Yeah, that one was really easy to use and really good.
I think in terms of FPS editors, the one I used the most was probably Time Splitters for the PS2. I played around with that map editor so much. It was so limited in what you could do, just basically snapping together prefabs essentially.
Yeah.
But I still love just being able to build your own stuff, design your own experiences, and then play it in multiplayer with your friends was really good. Oh gosh, are you gonna get it?
I got it.
Right on the edge.
Yeah, I was like, why didn't I pick it up and then go through it, and then I realized I was outrunning it.
Yeah, so you actually do pull in power-ups with the wings, so it'll catch you eventually, but you move so fast that you can kind of almost dodge things briefly.
Oh, shut the battery.
Yeah, someone in chat remembers Time Splitters. That game was great.
So
I like that you're starting to make more use of this rotating platforms around the edges, so when the battery spun around, you could spin around with it.
Yeah.
I think that's important with the levels as well, is that you don't always have to view the dynamics of the levels as a challenge to be overcome, but often it's an opportunity for you to be more efficient than you would be if it wasn't doing these things. It's the same with the kind of escalators from the earlier level, that when you're fighting against them, they can be so painful, but then if you make use of them, they can be so beneficial.
It's also extremely disorienting, as fun as it is.
Especially
because it got to the point where it's like just super changing everything.
They go very fast late in the level like this.
Oh god.
But when you are making use of them like this, you're crushing this level now compared to the first few tries, right?
Yeah, now it's like much easier to do.
Everything's dead.
Oh man, that was intense.
She's like, everything's dead. Doesn't care. The game does get harder as it rolls on. You're now over halfway through.
They have, I'm guessing, custom dialogue, like on the Android side, but does it adapt from the bosses as well?
Yeah, it's adapted from both of them. Although typically the first thing the boss says will be very similar regardless of which character you have, because they kind of have something to say, and then from there it'll branch out depending on what the android says.
Okay, I don't know.
What's up, CJ, in the chat? It's one of the rad people from our speedrunning community.
Hey.
Lovely guy.
So
Don't get lasered in the face.
yeah, I was like, oh, I don't have to go to his side. I can just stand in front of him and shoot him in the face because that's not where the shield is, and then he lasers me.
That's his thing.
It's a good trade-off, though. It's kind of like, okay, yeah, you don't have to reposition yourself drastically, but he can shoot you from there. I love doing this with any laser weapon in these games. It's like, whoosh, clearing up stuff. Uh-oh, I got the slope.
So we try with each of the bosses to really push their identities as far apart from each other as possible. So you saw the first boss had really light bullet hell, the second boss had huge amount of spawns, and then this boss is not really shooting bullets at you at all, right? And he keeps spawning things, but they're not a big deal. Almost all of his attacks are instantaneous beam weapons of some kind, so really trying to like give you something new and interesting to deal with rather than just a harder version of what you've already dealt with before.
I do like that you can break the trap lasers he sets. Oh god. That was a
And then he
mistake.
throws his head at you because he's angry.
Oh, there we go. Nice.
Smashed it.
That was I like that fight.
Plasma Dragondo is Manta. Ah, so we have some got some cool people coming over from the Cactus Discord. They've heard me prattle on about this stuff before.
Nice. Well, welcome aboard. You will be seeing suboptimal gameplay here. Okay, let's try Origin.
So Aubergine actually doesn't she doesn't have a traditional gun. She'll see in just a moment.
Oh, okay. She has a little.
She has a
android.
helper.
Nice.
Yeah, a helper robot.
Oh,
And you
she-
can spin him and swing him
Oh.
around.
Oh, and she has a
um,
black hole.
That's right, it sucks everything in and damages them, and then you collect it. She has two ways you can kind of control it on the control pad, which is whenever you release the trigger, Hilo will swing back towards you, but also depending on which way you're facing, he'll point that way, so you can swing the aim direction around to kind of move him like a big wrecking ball.
Yeah, this is like,
And then when you're oh, go ahead.
this is really weird. Which I guess was the
can
point.
be totally crazy. Again, that was kind of a decision to make Aubergine the second character you unlock, because Starch is easy to get the hang of and kind of instantly fun, whereas Aubergine is like, some people think she's the best character ever in any of this kind of game, and then a lot of other people think she's terrible. So by having her as the second character, it kind of sets the tone that we can do these wildly different characters, and also you're already being encouraged by the first one to actually try different characters.
Also, this might have not
She can
been
be
the wisest
very
first
tricky.
stage to play her on.
Yeah, I mean, she's unlocked after you beat Vespula, so you're now 2 worlds deep past that point and having to deal with significantly harder encounters, but that's the nature of trying different characters, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay, I think I understand this a bit better. I basically have to just keep tapping my trigger if everyone is right in front of me.
Or you can just swing it around, so you can point backwards if you want it to come back towards you. Depending on which is easier for you, essentially.
Okay, I really need a berry. Oh god.
You're getting it now. You see, you've got like a lot of weapon energy, so now Hilo is ridiculously huge and actually chops things pretty quickly.
No, that seems like a pretty good character. I might swap her out though, simply because she's requiring more mental processing power from me.
Yeah, she's a very difficult character for the whole playing the first time and talking and asking questions.
So what inspired you to make something like this? Like having a character that's not shooting, but like throwing a massive sword, basically?
I guess it comes down to a lot of the same goals we had with the entire game, which is if you're going to make a shoot 'em up, or in particular if you're going to make a twin-stick shoot 'em up, you kind of have to justify why it exists. Why don't I just go play one of the 100 fairly terrible ones that already are out there on Xbox Live Arcade or Steam, or one of the handful of really amazing ones that are also out there. And so we really just... We're trying to think of interesting things that haven't been done before, that they're not just controversial. They're not like, oh, I haven't seen that before, but oh, I haven't seen that before, and that's really interesting. That's really fun to play with. So in this case, it was, what about controlling two spaces of the map at the same time? My position and my weapon position simultaneously. And it's just, I don't know, I think it's really fun. I think it surprises your expectations. It comes away, it's not like any of the other guns in the game. We're a tiny team, so anytime you make more content, like you were saying before, you have to model them, you have to get sound, you have to do voice acting, weapon effects, all this stuff. You want to try and get the most amount of value out of it, so instead of having just another gun that shoots in a straight line, try and come up with something that's really, really interesting and really fun and adds a lot of value to the game. You know, 3 people making this whole game, and we have to be sure that every second we work on it is doing something worthwhile, I guess.
Yeah. No, this is pretty good. I like the entire idea. I think this might even be easier on a mouse than how I'm playing it right now.
It can be, yeah, because on a mouse you get the targeting reticle, so it targets that point and then kind of hovers around it with some slight variance.
Yeah, here I'm kind of like trying to tap it to keep it at like a consistent distance, so it's easier for me to like position myself reliably. Like, okay, I know I need to be here.
And that was one of the tricky constraints to deal with as well in the design, that we wanted the game to be as close as possible between keyboard and mouse players and control pad players. So in the way that we designed this weapon, the way that you control it, we went through a lot of iteration and thought process and trying to make sure it wasn't just a weapon that would be fun on mouse and keyboard and then suck on controller. And I think it's fun on controller. It might be slightly easier on keyboard and mouse, but it kind of works on both of them. And we tried things like amount of analog you input could be the distance, but there's just not enough accuracy in the triggers on most control pads.
No, I think this is now. I now have a feel for it, like how I actually used it. It was just weird at the start, like, okay, when does it come back?
So you can see why she's a suboptimal character for the first unlock, potentially.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially because like then you just set a precedent of like, oh, are all unlock characters like this? I'm just not gonna touch them. I'm just gonna stick with the default ones.
You create your players' expectations, and then you have to deal with that. So being very aware of that, and I think just being aware of how, like, the mental state of the people who are playing your game is really important to me. This game is, for example, really exhausting to play. It is 100 miles per hour all the time. It doesn't let up, it doesn't slow down, it doesn't stop. And there are negatives that come with that. It's also a huge positive because it's exciting all the time, but it also means you don't get to chill out while it's actually in action. So trying to think about that and plan around that whenever you're building your content is really, I personally think it's really important.
So I'm just trying not to die at the moment. This sometimes happens on these streams. But no, this is a really good concept. Like the first moment I picked her, I was okay. This is not gonna be good. Like when it just like shot the weapon at first, but now it makes more sense. More just like understanding the logic of how the little saw thing handles it.
If you get it stuck on a wall as well around the other side and then release your trigger, if it is trying to come back to you and actually hits the wall, it'll teleport back to you because you can't obviously allow it to get stuck away from you.
Yeah.
Oof. You got the battery at least.
Yeah. Get back here.
Yeah, these little blue Fidos, they latch onto you and hold you in place. They're super annoying to deal with. I think one of the worst reviews we ever got was from someone who was like, "I loved this game up until I had to deal with this enemy." 3 out of 5 or whatever. But I am okay with that personally. I think it's almost desirable to have something that stands out so strongly as being so annoying that you want to deal with it instantly. If every enemy kind of had the same danger profile associated with them, you would lose a lot of the nuance that makes every encounter interesting.
Okay, now try the railgun character. God, I'm getting Crimson Land vibes from this.
So the railgun is interesting because it's actually one of the most dominant weapons for high score chasers in our community once you become an expert with it, but simultaneously is one of the worst weapons for people who, when they first pick it up, because of the incredibly slow fire rate, the way that you have to line up enemies so specifically to maximize its damage potential. But it kind of works, and again, it's one of those things where we get maximum value out of a new weapon because it's so different to the other weapons. Her secondary are propeller mines that pop up and destroy things, and you'll notice that they actually the weapon swap timing is almost perfectly in sync with how long you take to reload after a single railgun shot. And that's kind of by design, but the way that it's worked out with our top players has been way beyond anything I could have expected. Because the top players who are playing this game are doing these perfect kind of shoot once, weapon swap, drop a single mine, shoot, swap back, shoot again, lining up the enemies, and it looks like a bullet ballet when they play this character. I just love it.
Yeah, I can see how this character could be the dominant one, like in terms of scoring and speedrunning. I guess because it's also like you can predict enemy behaviors, not necessarily easily, but like because they move consistently, you can align them up
Exactly.
just as consistently.
You create your own opportunities, essentially, which is always going to be better than having to deal with chaos.
Yeah.
And it might look like chaos, especially the first time you play, it looks like chaos, but the more you play, the more the chaos, like you see the pattern inside of it. And at that point, you kind of perfect it. It's like we were talking about earlier, where it's not random, it's, it's all that kind of hero player design, where we want people who get really good at the game to be able to know exactly where enemies are going to spawn, when power-ups are going to spawn, what power-ups are going to spawn, all that kind of stuff. So everything in the game works off of chaotic information that's hard to control, being things like your exact character positioning determines which spawn points the enemies use, and the millisecond in which you destroy the enemies determines which power-up color it first starts as. But over time you can develop the ability to kind of game those systems.
So how long was the game in development?
We quit our jobs at our various companies. So I was at Sega Australia, and so was Tim for a while before that, but he moved on to Kixeye, and we quit those jobs in. Oh, you died.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I shouldn't talk so much.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I blame myself only.
So that was the start of 2013 when we did that, which is now a really, really long time ago that I say it out loud. And we worked on it for maybe like 8 months or so, or something like that, before we won a competition for the Intel Level Up competition. And part of that was you got to release a demo on Steam, and we decided that it would be interesting. Early access had just become a thing, and we thought, since we had to release a demo anyway, and it was so mid-development, that we would try and do open development on Steam with the game. So we, from the end of 2013 until the full release later on towards the end of 2015, we were doing early access. Which was, I think it was kind of maybe the wrong type of game to do it with in some ways, since there's no dynamic content, you know. Like, I think Nuclear Throne is a perfect example of a game that worked really well in early access, because you can tweak a few things and then the whole game changes, being, you know, procedural in some ways. Whereas when you're a very pure arcade style game like this, people play the content and then you balance it and you change it and you add more levels, but you're not drastically altering the game. It's not procedural, it's not going to change when I change a C.
Yeah,
but it was certainly interesting.
So how did you deal with one of the issues I know Nuclear Throne had was that the people testing the game got too good at it, so eventually the game just became absurdly difficult. How did you balance basically feedback from expert players versus, you know, people who would possibly play the game fresh when it's released fully?
I think you just have to be really mindful of that problem and careful about who you're taking feedback from. Take it from a lot of different sources. So the guy with 200 hours on Steam who reviews it and gives you a bunch of information and comes in your Discord and talks to you. Some of the people in your chat right now are super helpful, lovely people who I trust more than anyone to tell me if a character's scoring potential is as good or as bad as it needs to be. But I'm not going to go and ask them, hey, do you think that you know, new players are going to struggle with Vespula or with something else? So in our case, we used a lot of game conventions to make sure we were always getting new players through who'd never seen the game before. You take it to PAX, you take it to South by Southwest, all these different things. And we were lucky enough that people seemed to really like our game, so we got picked for 2 different PAX showcases and for South by Southwest Gamer's Voice, which meant we're not paying for booths and things and could actually afford to take it to these conventions, which, you know, they're not free, so not everybody can do what we did. But it really did help to have a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old come through and play co-op at South by Southwest, and I watched them the whole time, and I learn about my game from a perspective that's totally different to the hardcore people who are buying it on Steam. So just making sure that you're taking information from more sources than your fan base, than your community, I guess. Your community are people who are already bought into your game, so I don't think your community are particularly a great group of people to go to when it comes to evaluating how new people are going to approach your game. Right at the end. Get the battery?
That's fine, I got greedy and the Blizzard.
I believe in you.
There we go. Oh, good.
So, I mean, that was our solution. Granted, I don't think everybody can use that solution, but that's generally the advice I'd give to people.
Yeah, it requires, you know, like I said, like going to conventions and having like a regular influx of new players, which again is pretty hard. Like, I think actually Nuclear Throne, there was this one point, I don't think they went on sale. It was like everybody who owned the game got a gift copy of the game to give it to someone. So they would have an influx of new players to give them feedback.
They did actually totally do that, and it was great. Which I guess is trying to solve the problem in another way, right? Just you want more people playing it.
Yeah, because
the tricky thing for me though is that I personally like to see what's happening, because I think it's difficult to analyze feedback. Like my general go-to saying is that nobody's ever wrong about how they feel. because it's impossible to kind of be wrong about that, I guess, when you're upset with a game or happy about a game or something like that. But quite often they're wrong about why they feel the way they do. And you have to be very careful about taking feedback and how you actually action and how you deal with it.
Yeah. Also, we talked before the stream just very briefly about Clive Barker's Undying and the Rising Tiles, and now we're in this level. Is that a coincidence, or did that inspire you?
This level is actually inspired by Knack, the PS4 game.
Oh, okay.
There is a section like late in Knack where you have to do a bunch of platforming, and there's two floating jet propulsion platforms, and you jump on one, and then the other one like collapses itself back in and flies up to a higher position, and then you jump to that one, and the one you were just on repositions. So doing like tiles that make themselves is kind of easy, but well, not easy, but it's been done, right? So what we came up with here was the idea that if you have a limited set of physical objects and they are creating the gameplay area, so there's actually a fixed set of tiles here, and they're having to move from one edge to the other edge as you move around the level. Whereas in Undying and things like that, they would often just be like, you know, they were always there, they were just animating as you got close to them, right?
Yeah.
So you can see now we've changed the layout of the level, so whenever you move around, it rebuilds itself into a completely flat environment. So we can actually change the grid layout, and then it will dynamically create itself as you move around. And our solution for this stuff is fairly trivial too, while some of it can look really complicated. Like the earlier level with the blocks that completely rebuilt itself is all mapped out of a 32 by 24 pixel grid. I can't remember the exact number of pixels right off the top of my head, but it's a tiny pixel grid where I use the RGB color values of each pixel to determine the state that I want the blocks to change to. You know, if they're green, they're going to change to ground. If they're red, they're going to change to a pillar, and then I can just paint new layouts in 10 or 15 seconds and try them out in game and dynamically make new gameplay experiences very, very, very quickly.
Yeah, I think I'm slowly getting the feel of when batteries are meant to spawn.
Yeah, there's a lot of rules that go into the battery spawns, and there's change as well across the campaign. So, in terms of how many enemies you have to defeat in order for a new one to spawn, there's also certain helper rules, and this is stuff that we don't explain mechanically to people as they're playing the game because it's not something that you need to think about. You only ever need to think about, I need to destroy enemies as quickly as possible because that's how you get a new battery. But in terms of systems, it's doing a lot of calculations of how many enemies you destroyed, what their point value was. If you're in a positive battery state, you can actually go into a kind of debt where if you're about to game over, it will spawn a battery, but then in order to get your next one, you need to destroy even more enemies to get back into a positive state. So there's a lot of like nuance that goes into when you get a new battery that is relevant, but I guess not overtly displayed. So I actually do the voice acting for this boss.
Oh, nice.
All of us on the dev team do different voices. So Tim was Justice, this is me. Jeff voices Control at the start. His wife voices Vespula, and his daughter is the voice of the Witchbeam logo when the game boots up. We got professional voice actresses for the androids, but the bosses are more robotic and more auto-tuned, so we're able to use some of our own voices.
Oh man, I'm getting major Fury vibes from this. Because one of my least favorite bosses in that game has a massive arena like this, with probably this number of projectiles. Possibly more. Oh god. I feel like maybe I should switch characters for this. We'll see. You
can switch character, or you can try and get ahead of the arm and place down the mines in the path that it's going to roll towards.
Yeah, well, for this I think I need to align myself better.
And because you have a railgun, you can actually hit multiple of these simultaneously as well.
Yep. Yep. I think I'll try another character for this. So let's try. Let's go back to Holly. Go back to basics. Seems like might be best for commentary purposes.
Alright. Good luck.
Thank you.
Don't let my mocking laugh get to you when you die.
Oh, it's fine. I'm used to it from chat. That was possible.
I was trying to channel my inner Starscream for the voice of this boss. Starscream meets Gollum.
Okay, I guess this is the range I need for my homing thing. Oof.
Yeah, you need to get a little bit closer and then shoot the cannonball ahead of it. There you go, you're doing good damage now.
Yeah, just need to make sure to get a battery. Getting a bit worse right now at dodging, but I'll attribute it to fatigue. Whoop.
Can happen. It's also one of the first levels with really so this is a true bullet hell boss as compared to the earlier one who was kind of super soft bullet hell, right? Like this is patterns and dodging and some one-hit kill bullets as well. This is something else I didn't talk about with the visual design when we were mentioning bullet design, that all the lighting in the game during gameplay segments is actually flat facing downwards so that we can always have accurate shadow casters, because it's very hard to tell the exact position of the bullets, but subliminally having a shadow that is 100% accurate at all times to the exact position of the object really does help. It limits our visual variance a bit, but I think that it makes a big difference to people's ability to play, and like we always prioritize that as part of our design. Was people being able to play the game was always more important than whether or not an aspect of the game was as pretty as it could be.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Oof, that's been intense.
Yeah, as you destroy each of those 8 oh yeah, you're talking about the drill. Yeah, as you destroy each of the 8 arms that he had earlier as well, each one starts to shoot more and more rapidly, but in smaller quantities. Shorter bursts, rather.
Well, this thing has a lot of health here.
Yeah, the drill is very strong. You need to just keep nailing it with that cannonball every time you can. Oh, close. I'm just watching on Twitch now as the
side stream
one with no delay has kind of died.
Yeah, yeah. Next time we do this, I will probably not be dying. Well, one day. There we go.
So as you've been destroying his arms, he's now reduced just to his body and his giant butt.
Nice. There we go.
So hopefully, you know, as you go through each of the bosses, there's some level of surprise to each of them. That's the goal anyway.
Yeah, so far it's been doing its job. You know, one of my questions was, will we get an android that uses a sword? And I'm hoping this is unlockable because that would be cool. Well, that's not really a surprise.
Shadowy figure.
Oh god, I got knocked down 9 times. Well, at least I'm in the top 10,000.
Again, though, it's kind of the way that the game works is lives aren't everything. Progress and efficiency is what counts.
Okay, I'd say let's try and Peanut. Maybe 2 more levels. We can slowly wrap this up. 'Cause I think we've touched on
You're
almost
now on the
everything.
final world, so there's
we're-
5 levels left.
Oh, we can then possibly do the entire game then.
Gets pretty hard here. So the campaign is 25 levels long.
Ooh, I like that special weapon. That is a good special weapon.
So she has the only physically interactive weapon in the game, which does latch on to large enemies and lets you push them through smaller enemies, and will actually kill the small enemies as AoE damage, or you can just drill straight through them. But yeah, if you hit a big one, it'll latch them, and you can smash them against the wall for bonus damage. The Giga Drill. Yes, Giga Drill break, as someone
Yeah, it is.
in chat mentioned.
As soon as I saw a drill, I was like, ah, we finally found the most anime character.
She's great. Smash.
No, this is really good. I like the physicality of it.
And because her weapon is not a projectile or like a firing weapon as well, its weapon energy, it auto swaps you back out even when you haven't depleted it, so you can kind of like swap around and use it quite often. It'll only deplete as much energy as you use for however much you push through. So every time it's destroying enemies, it's using up its allotted energy.
It also seems to be good to pick up like batteries you're desperate to get to.
Oh yeah, if you need to get across the level, she's the champ. You can even like go and then reorient yourself if that's a problem. And if you fire it at just the right angle on an angled wall like this, you can even spin around the level because it won't hard stop.
Oh, nice.
As you see, when you're getting more and more of that weapon up energy, the magma gun is really good too. And the splats that it leaves will actually damage enemies that walk on top of them.
Oh, that's nice. I really like
So
this
while it's not
character.
100% efficient for missed firing, she does have a lot of damage potential. She's a lot of fun. I love Peanut.
So when you decide to have unlockable characters, like in some games they'd be like, oh, you rescue this character and now they're part of your arsenal. Like there's like this whole narrative moment. Do you ever consider doing that, or were you fine with just them, popping into your unlockable screen?
We did consider doing it for a while. Having the character be visually present in some way, or having mini cutscenes, but ultimately we felt like it was a combination of kind of slight overkill, I guess, that the game, the way that it turned out, the very pure arcade style, it's kind of narrative light, and that was important to us, that you keep the flow going really strongly, especially after you beat a boss. You have that little chat moment and then you're straight back into the game using the new thing. That, and also the time and effort cost associated that would be like pretty significant, actually, in a game that otherwise has like 3 actual cutscenes across the game, and all the artwork being done by one person. So it was kind of it works without it, and doing it would be pretty significant, so go with it. I don't think it's just a clear win if you add it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
Kind
no.
of-
It makes
Yeah.
sense. Like, I mean, in an ideal world, we'd add everything in a game we could, but, sometimes it's better with less.
Yeah, and in the context of this game as well, is that it does also keep the flow really, really fast, which is important. Having a narrative is important as well, but then you have to fight. They fight each other, right? Like how much narrative you have versus how much arcade action gameplay you have. They don't always work together well.
Yeah, I think it's one of the design things that gets like or the game dev things that gets overlooked frequently is not every design decision is the best decision for every game. Like,
yeah,
you can hardly look at anything in a vacuum.
No, that's absolutely right. I think people often misunderstand that, especially when it comes to content. It's like typically a lot of people view it as more content is always better, but it's not always the case. Sometimes it's better to have lean moments in a game.
I remember that period of video. I also like that I have now my own traps.
Yeah. So there's 3 different pads you can jump on this level that give you different power-ups. And the one in the top left is probably the most situational because it's a big shield, but also rockets go through it. So if you're fighting a phase like this with a lot of rockets, it's not as useful.
Yeah.
But Peanut's great on this level compared to some of the other androids because you can get around between the different sections very quickly. You get down and then you activate the turret, and look, it just like annihilates everything, right?
Yeah. I really like just using her drill. It's really good.
It's super fun. Super fun. I love it on Centrifuge where you just smash things into the wall. It's one of the hardest weapons to balance out. As in terms of characters, she's one of the hardest to balance out because her damage per second efficiency it's not easy to keep it high like the other characters. The drill is so situational and so specific the way that it works. It's not just like you're shooting at things and damaging them. You're quite often using it for non-damage purposes.
Oh, damn. I didn't realize I could get hit while drilling. That's something we should keep in mind.
You are invulnerable if you're latched onto an enemy, but otherwise you can totally be hit while it's drilling.
Yep. Like that.
It's awesome to see that turret just shooting everything in the back. Oh, get the battery!
Yep.
Yeah, you got it.
Oof. Completely missed that guy with a drill.
Yeah, we do a few things with the drill to try and help you with the aiming of it as well. There's certain weapons in the game that have instant aiming. So for example, there's a slight rotation speed related to your character's positioning, right? So you can smoothly spray and aim around. If you notice, like if you face 180 degrees, it's not instantaneous, which again was a really conscious decision and something we were very careful about because most arcade style shmups are instantaneous facing, right?
Yeah.
But then certain weapons like the drill or like Holly's Cannonball is the best example, where whichever direction you are holding the stick when you press fire, it will come out in that direction regardless of where you're facing, because you only get one shot at shooting it, and so trying to deal with the turning animation would be just like too much basically to deal with. So we make minor concessions there.
This sounds like a very bad map for a drill.
Yes. So this is a map I designed again. It was a spin on the kind of tech that I created, I guess, for doing the blocks level. So I'm using the same system to be able to paint heat maps of where I want the fire to attack you, and create gameplay without physically changing the layout, but with kind of creating no-go zones, right? And because the
Yeah.
damage is red, you can even use it to your advantage because it will hurt enemies. But the drill's still pretty useful here, being able to, because they're not instant kill fire zones, you can often drill through them to get somewhere safe.
I mean, I feel if you have an enemy you can latch onto right away, it's also pretty useful because I'm guessing it doesn't do damage to you.
No.
Yeah, then in that context, yeah, it might actually be okay.
And being a big open level, there's like a lot of space for you to drill. So it's a simultaneously not the perfect level for the drill, but there's still a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, it's a pretty tricky level, but I do like this and the previous block level you said this is based on. Because it's like a small arena, but it's I like things like that when it's basically constantly shifting without it being too, I could say like, it's basically it's a similar effect to an actual level you progress through physically, but it has you play differently in the same space.
Yeah, no, that was the goal, was to be able to reuse the same physical space in a lot of different ways. I'm glad you're liking Peanut. See, that's the thing about these characters, though, is that there's characters you'll love, and there's characters you'll hate, and there's characters that someone else will feel the exact opposite about. There's someone out there who hates Peanut and, you know, loves Starch, and they're just adamant that their feeling on the characters is the correct way to feel about them, you know?
Yeah. Oh man.
It's very much that fighting game approach where I think Hugo is terrible. He's a terrible character. No one would ever play Hugo. But then my buddy plays Hugo all the time and insists that he's the best.
Oh man, yeah. I'm playing Tekken with colleagues at lunch breaks right now, and I play Kuma, and I think everybody hates me for it because they all hate that character.
Yep, that's how it works.
Yeah. Oh god. No, I think so far all the characters I've tried, Peanut, the Blade Lady, and Holly are my favorites. Holly mostly because I really like the cannonball. I mean, I like a lot of the physicality of some of these characters, like in terms of they're not just projectile based, but like Holly's cannonball feels more physical. Peanut obviously has her drill, which is basically a charged melee attack. And then, I forget her name, the purple android?
Aubergine,
yeah, her blade is kind of like detached from her, so it doesn't feel like a projectile.
Yep.
Which basically means I like non-static characters.
Yeah. They're very physical, then I think that's also fairly non-typical of this type of game for them to be that physical. Like, it is mostly about bullet patterns and that kind of thing, so they probably stand out more as being different to what you normally experience.
I mean, it also helps the I imagine it's a bit encouraging when you build like a system that's based on shooting, and then you create a character that doesn't shoot and it actually works well.
Yeah, absolutely. You notice the fire is chasing you now?
Yeah.
So it's not just... so what it does is that the first third is patterns, then the fire chases you, then we go back to more complex patterns, and then the finale is patterns plus it chasing you simultaneously. So it's really reducing your options. Oh, so close. And the drill's great as well for grabbing those power-ups that are just in inconvenient spots. You know, like sideswipe them.
Man, that was intense.
Nicely done.
Oh god, Licorice. That is a good name.
Welcome to the most reviled level in the game, but also one of the most interesting levels. We'll see how it goes for you. I believe in you.
We can do this. I think of all the enemies, I don't mind anything, but the bombs get me so many times.
Yeah, the AoE can be very difficult to deal with on those.
I don't even
Well, you
mind.
dealt with them at this level.
Yeah, I don't even mind the lasers, the laser enemies, even though they get me quite often. Go.
Anything that can clip you when you think you're safe is typically what leads to people feeling like they got cheated or unfairly killed, even if it's totally predictable to some degree. So yeah, like bombs that have they explode and then you see the AoE afterwards. If that makes sense, that like leads to a mental kind of scenario where
Yeah.
you think you were safe but you weren't. So it feels unfair. Alright, here we go. Getting almost to the
The hated part.
danger zone. Always bet on fair. People are judging you for your pick.
Oh. I have a habit of being stubborn on stream, so we can do this. Ah, okay. So, this is what I have to deal with. Oh shit, I need a battery though. That's a bigger issue. Oh wow.
You know who else needs a battery?
Oh man. Oh, she takes my batteries?
She's an android. Got her
Oh.
own battery power.
Oh god, that's vicious.
On the plus side though, because death is not the end, that does mean that fights with Licorice can be very prolonged.
Okay, I can get everything. I just need to stop getting KO'd.
So you need to stop her getting a battery.
Yeah. Oh, she dodged me. Oh, I killed her.
Oh, so close. Yeah, well done.
Oh man.
So that's really cool that you're able to beat her on the first go. That's very unusual.
Oh man.
So she plays by your rules. She has her weapons. She has her weapon cooldowns. She has weapon swap dodge. She levels up when she gets things. She can collect power ups and she can grab batteries. So it's a battle of attrition rather than damage perfection.
Yeah, the moment you like, because I got a battery, like I saw a battery drop and I saw my battery didn't change. I was like, wait, did I pick it up? Did it not count because I died? And when you said she takes the battery, it just oh no, this is not good.
Yeah. When she shows up, her battery meter pops up down the bottom, taking over the UI there. So you have yours on top and hers down there.
Yeah, I just assumed that was a fancy way to show her health, but no. Ah, okay.
Well
so
done.
This is the final boss, I assume.
Yes.
Oh.
This final boss is voiced by Jeff's daughter, Ella.
Neat. wonder how useful a drill will be for this. Oh god.
It does do a fair chunk of damage if you drill into it and use up all the energy, so just hold it down.
Ow.
So you really need to be using your secondary, your drill, just to put as much damage on it as you can.
Ooh.
So this boss is a mix of new phases and new things to deal with, and then also revamped versions of existing encounters.
Yeah, I think the AoEs are what are getting me right now the most.
They're a lot faster and a lot larger than you might be used to.
Yeah,
And the idea was similarly, this is almost like an homage to the genre, to the style of games that came before it, but also to itself, to try and like make the most use out of all the crazy things you've seen up until now.
I think I will switch characters though, because her weapon is just too short range for me for this fight. So I will go. I'll just go Folly because of her cannonball.
All right.
Try that. Going against all the choices in chat right now.
Cactus starch. They don't know. They don't know your holy power.
Good face planet.
As long as you're dealing damage, it's okay to get face planted occasionally, though.
Because a cannonball has fairly decent range.
Yeah, and very high damage.
There we go, it's going much better already.
Do not interfere. I've sacrificed too much.
Oh god, this layout.
I'm just gonna be a little bit quiet. Give you some time to focus.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. Should have dodged later. Oh no, it's this boss again.
Luckily the cannonball is not a one hit, so it can kind of go through the outer layer of defensive boss smasher.
Oof, bad dodge.
Ooh, miss.
Oh, then the cannonball missed.
I will not falter.
Get a berry.
Yes.
Damn, I am bad at dodging these things.
It's a very tricky phase to deal with.
Yeah, I feel I'm just tanking this boss at this point.
But that's kind of where most bosses like this start at, and then over time you'll get the rest of it.
Laser output insufficient. Switching hardware.
Make sure you destroy the laser fences.
Yep, trying.
Damage levels
There we go.
I like that you used his own head to destroy him, partially. Good luck.
Thank you. Oh my god. Come on. So close. I'm getting brutalized. There we go.
Smashed.
Oh, never mind, there's a second phase. I forgot this was a video game for a moment, that we need to have the true final boss.
That's how it works.
Can't believe I have to fight polygons.
Polygons are always the true final boss of any game.
This is a very 16-bit era where almost every real end boss had like this kind of cyberspace thing to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay, it's enemies remaining. Oh wait, where are my battery drops? Do I not get them? Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's no battery. It's just 60 seconds of pure destruction. Well played, well done. Beat it first go and everything.
Nice. Oh, my fingers. I also love her wind pose. It reminds me a lot of Theo from Metal Slug. Like, oh, I'm just so tired of this.
That's her personality too, is that she's not the proactive gung-ho cactus. She's like, whew, it's over.
For the safety of everyone on board, we should disconnect her before she reactivates.
You want to lobotomize a spaceship? The core controls everything. Even in a weakened state, if she figures out what we're doing, she'll destroy the ship.
I also love how Peanut looks like a Quake 1 character.
The one horn, busted eye. She's the ship's mechanic.
Are you suggesting we plug Holly directly into the core? If anything goes wrong, Holly's brain will end up like a blown fuse. Lemon, it's alright. I can do this.
Interfering with the operation of a core is a serious criminal offense, even for humans. Cactus, you're a police officer.
We try to push their personalities to the forefront in these like few cutscenes.
Fire in the hole!
Wow, Cactus is a real loose cannon.
A literal loose cannon.
Oh man. Just a shock on everyone's face.
And that is that.
What did you do?
The way I saw it, the core was the problem. Blowing it up was the fastest way to fix things. Don't worry. I do this kind of thing all the time.
Fix things or destroy multi-billion-dollar pieces of equipment on impulse.
Both?
Nice. Well, that was really fun. I didn't expect to finish it on stream.
I'm glad you had a good time.
Yeah.
Hopefully some of the stuff I was prattling on about was interesting to people.
No, definitely. It's always useful to learn these kind of things from a gamer perspective. This will also go on YouTube, so people can watch it on demand when they want.
Oh, cool. Hello, future YouTube viewers.
Yeah. Hello from the past.
Yeah, it's pretty cool here in the past. Probably wish you could come back here.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Anything you'd like to add before we close this up? Like anything you want to cover as well?
You know, I think I've pretty much talked about everything. I guess it always just came back to how important we felt it was to make something that justified its own existence, and I hope that came through in the game, that you could play other games, but there are reasons to play this one other than them. That sounds really petty and simple, but like that's a core part of the philosophy. Make sure that everything that's in the game is on purpose, and that we made the decision to include it or do it the way we did on purpose, rather than just because that's how it's done or that's like how it could be done. So yeah, I really think that that's the driving factor behind why the game plays the way it does, why it feels the way it does, and hopefully why it feels unique, because it is a unique experience.
I'm just a joker they didn't remove from the pack. If you're looking for your McDuff, keep an eye on that ace on top deck.
You can't possibly mean that green-haired lunatic. She just
There's this a cliffhanger setup for Assault Android Cactus 2.
If we ever get around to making that game, sure.
Yeah.
It's the fact that the story was not concluded, right? Like Licorice got away. So we did decide to include some more information there for anybody who stuck around through the credits and didn't just skip to the end in case they were interested in what comes next. And, you know, just carrying on with the other stuff that we think is cool for people who have finished the game, you unlock boss rush and infinity drive mode, which is like a pseudo kind of endless dynamic level that you can play for a really long time. Lots of little bonuses, so you can view all the models for the enemies in the game. They're playing their like walk animations or attacks, and you can read about the in-game lore for all of them, all the characters, all the enemies, and the locations. Play through the sound test and music and that kind of thing. So lots of little touches that I felt like they add to the feeling that this is a very complete experience. If that makes any sense, it makes it feel like you can really see the things that we cared about in the game coming through.
I like Bomber Titan's little dance. Anything you'd like to plug? Where can people find you, ask you about video games, or any future things you're working on?
Yeah, if you check out my Twitter is like @Sanatana Mishra, which I guess we could post in the YouTube eventually or something like that. But
It'll be in the YouTube description.
If you're looking for the game, it's on Steam, it's on PS4, it's a free demo on PC that you can try and check it out. I downloaded, it's fairly up to date, and it's got like a whole world worth of levels and characters. And if you're looking for future stuff that we're doing, you can always check out @Ironic account, which is Tim, who's the artist and kind of pseudo creative director here of our 3-person group. And he's always tweeting out cool GIFs and images of new things that we're prototyping and working on.
Awesome. Well, thank you again very much for dropping by here and talking about your game. It was really fun, and I'm sure lots of insight for both me and people watching. So next thing you do, feel free to drop by again.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I had a great time.
Bye bye, stream.
Bye.